The L322 Range Rover is truly one of those cars that makes no sense to buy for most people. They're seen as slightly obnoxious, gas-guzzling, unreliable tanks made for people with an ego as big as their credit card limit. They're bashed on constantly for being unreliable, and even people who have never owned one or even driven one seem to like to put their 2 cents in. This is my L322 Range Rover, and I'm here to say that if you have your 2 cents to put in about it, please send it through PayPal. Sure, the 3rd generation Range Rover may not be known for being the most reliable SUV on the market, and it certainly has its flaws here and there. But Land Rover have always been able to do with the Range Rover what no other car brand has ever been able to achieve, which is capturing the spirit of the Range Rover. To prove a quick point, think about this for a minute. Why, if Range Rovers are so horrible and unreliable and the biggest shitboxes around, do people continue to buy them? Wouldn't you think that if the cars were truly as awful and horrible to live with as people say, that no one would be stupid enough to buy one? But in fact, that's not the case. Even people who complain about the cost of ownership continue to drive them. And people who complain about their reliability yet have never owned one, well, they're a special breed of people. You see, if the Range Rover was truly as awful as people say, nobody would buy them. Instead, the used market moves decently for one that's been looked after, and even ones that have little to no service history sell pretty quickly for what they are. And that's due to one thing: they're unlike any other SUV on the market. The Range Rover is about pushing the limits of what's possible in any luxury car. And while the technology in the L322 may seem a bit dated compared to today's standard, when you look back to 2012 and 2011 when this model was out, it really was pushing the bounds for what luxury cars had in them. From capability to daily comforts, the Range Rover does things in ways that most cars don't even think to do. And on top of that, I might add that the new standard has been set by the L405 Range Rover, so they still hold the title. Every time you're behind the wheel of the Range Rover, you're reminded that it's constantly watching out for you. It does absolutely everything to make sure that the driver and the passengers are cocooned in a sea of leather and high-quality metals, and admittedly some cheap quality metals. But it ensures that you are always driving in complete safety, and you feel protected from pretty much anything. In fact, the lake next to me, I have no doubt that I could drive through it. Might ruin the car, but I could do it. From a traction control system that can get you out of the toughest situations, to locking differentials to make sure that you're always able to make it home, to an interior filled with the highest quality materials, you're good anywhere. The Range Rover takes the idea of being luxurious and makes that term its bitch. The Range Rover has a way of capturing your heart the second you step inside, and it feels like no other SUV on the market. Not even luxury SUVs. Last year, I spent $18,000 on owning this Range Rover, and while to some that may seem like the stupidest thing ever, and while I actually might agree, there's nothing that even comes close that I would rather spend my money on. There's no other SUV, really no other car, that is quite as perfect as the 3rd generation Range Rover. And if you're going to spend money on a luxury SUV, of which none are deemed reliable, why not get the one that actually is an SUV? The Cadillac Escalade, for example, is a perfectly fine SUV. It can take the kids to soccer practice, show off at the valet, and most certainly catch glances anywhere it goes. But yet it struggles to drive up a gravel driveway without spinning its 36-inch chrome wheels. Speaking of which, why did Cadillac enjoy chrome so much? The Mercedes G-Wagon is an incredible machine, and it's one of the coolest SUVs on the market, and surprisingly, they hold their value much better than near any other luxury SUV.
The off-road capabilities of the rich man's Jeep are matched by few, and it will certainly get looks everywhere it goes. But if you've ever taken a few minutes to drive a G-Wagon, you'll know how appalling they are to drive and live with on a daily basis.
Then there's the X5. Truly, I believe, one of the greatest SUVs to ever come out of Germany, and actually one of the greatest cars to ever come from BMW. It is, honestly, I think one of the best first SUVs you could ever buy. It's great. But with that, the X5 still has a challenge at matching the Range Rover's capabilities, even as perfect as it is.
The Cayenne is also a fantastic German SUV, and if you can force yourself to walk into your garage and look at an early generation Cayenne without being sick, it's probably the one for you. And if you look at the newer Cayenne and don't get bored by the shape, then there's really no reason not to buy the Cayenne, especially if you want something that really puts the S in SUV.
And that leaves us with just a few competitors, but even they clearly weren't even worth mentioning because of how dull they are. But that brings me to my point that the Range Rover is the bar that other car manufacturers try to achieve, and consistently fail to do so. The Range Rover is the pinnacle of the luxury SUV. But here's the thing. We all love what we love, and we drive what we want to drive because we love it. And each one of those SUVs has made a huge impact on the automotive industry. But yet all of them, minus maybe the G-Wagon, have been inspired by the Range Rover to keep reaching new levels of luxury, capability, and performance. But yet they're still all trying to get to the bar that is set by Land Rover with the Range Rover. And that applies to 2011 models like this one, and 2018 models like the new ones. And sure, all of the SUVs on this list were fantastic, but yet none of them are quite as balanced and perfect as the Range Rover, which I might add is still the best 4x4 by far.
And there's no point going on about how unreliable a Range Rover is. None of these SUVs are reliable compared to your base edition Chevy Tahoe from 2003. But Tesla, who also pushed the limits for what's possible in their industry, are far from the most reliable and well-built machines as well. The point is this. The Range Rover captures your heart because it does what no other SUV can achieve. It pushes the limits while remaining the best experience of any SUV on the road today. Not only is it extremely capable and luxurious, but it manages to balance every bit of capability and luxury that the others try to achieve.
So with that, drive what you love and drive what captures your heart. And as Nike says, believe in something, even if it means going bankrupt.